welcome to another conversation with Rob. I'm here with Russell Coates, and Russell is up in Derry or Londonderry, whichever way you like to call it. And Russell is the global content marketing specialist with Students for Liberty, and he's been writing the blog posts over on the SFL blog. He's been interviewing very interesting people on their Instagram lives. And I just thought it'd be a cool opportunity to talk. I've known Russell since I think 2017 when we got him involved in SFL, and now he's running the show now, and he's doing great stuff, and he's very interesting perspectives on this pandemic and lockdowns and all sorts of stuff. But he's also got some interesting life stories to share with us. So welcome, Russell. How are you?
Thanks very much for having me, Rob. I'm doing well, thanks. How's things with you in Dublin?
Well, they could be better. Things could be open. We could have an economy, and I might even think about staying in the country. But no, I won't be. So, but we might get into that later. You have had an interesting life, I would say, and I'd be interested to get into the bones of that. You've lived in France. You've lived a large part of your adult life over in or up in Northern Ireland, and you've overcome some adversity. So, what was childhood like? What was going on at the start of your life?
Hmm. Um, I suppose that's quite broad, but I guess I was an early learner and always sort of felt a bit like I never really belonged anywhere and was different from other people. And I suppose moving to France then was, I mean, that was huge for me at the time because it was uprooting me from everything I knew, from my school, from my friends, from just from everything, and going to somewhere that yes, I'd been there before on holiday, but I didn't really know the place. I couldn't speak a word of the language, and
Wow, that's
yeah,
tough.
just it felt, I suppose, at that time a bit like the end of the world, really, and that I'd no say in it. My father wanted to build a house over there, and it was an opportunity to do that, and I was just getting dragged there against my wishes. And what's interesting is like I started school in France. First day was so daunting because going straight into that environment where no one spoke my language and I didn't speak theirs.
Hmm.
I just felt, how am I going to cope here? I'm going to have to find a way to fast track learning the language, and like what am I doing here? But I actually found that I learned the language pretty quickly. Sort of said nothing for a few weeks, and then after that, I was able to hold basic conversations, and within a year, I was sort of the best in my class at spelling and French and stuff.
Wow.
Because
Would
I
you
was
say you're fluent?
yeah, I'd still say I'm fluent. I mean, it's been 7 years since I lived there, but I'd like to think I'm still fluent. I certainly was fluent back then.
Wow.
Um,
So what was the main difference, would you say, between Northern Ireland and France? What's the difference in the way of life?
there's many things. I suppose. Ooh, where do you even start? So much is different. Like people in the part of France where I was anyway, um, in the east of France near Switzerland. So there's mountains and lakes, and I mean you have that in Ireland too, but it's more, you get the weather there to be outdoors a lot more, and um, so people would be a lot more outdoors. People would be much more into their gardens, into their fresh produce. They'd be have some very strong views on food. In general, the people in the region where I was, I made some good friends there, but people aren't sort of immediately super friendly.
Not like the
There isn't that.
Irish.
Yeah, there isn't that sort of superficial um, pretending you're great friends with everyone you meet sort of thing, like you would get here a lot of the time.
Hmm.
It's quite different in that sense, and you'd be far more likely to see strangers being sort of openly rude towards one another, or openly hostile towards one another, which is funny because here, people have had a conflict for so long, but yet when people are around each other in person, it's a lot. Um, you know, you wouldn't get that from seeing people interact. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of differences. The education system in France was definitely behind compared to here. So even though it was not allowed at the time, there would have been, physical discipline in school there.
What? Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
In the early 2000s, physical discipline in school.
That's just insane to me. That is it still going on?
I can't speak for now, but
Wow.
back then,
We'll have
yeah.
to ask some of our French friends, but that to me is weird.
I'd say it would be very different now if you went to the cities, but where I was, it wasn't just my school, it was pretty much all the schools in the area.
And what sort of discipline?
Um, Kids would get hit, or
Where?
they would even get slapped in the head at times, or they would have their ear pulled, or they would get kicked up the backside.
What? That is
Yeah.
insanity.
So no, it took a bit of getting used to. But the interesting thing is, before moving, I I had made some progress, but to begin with, I was very badly behaved, and was far from a model pupil. You know, I
What was going on for you?
I was just so bored with what we were learning,
Mm.
because I'd basically covered everything before going to school that we were learning sort of in early primary school. It was extremely boring. I didn't like the setting. I didn't like anything about it. The whole environment didn't suit me. So I kind of acted out and was aggressive, which is weird for anyone who sort of knows me now, but didn't know me then,
Yeah,
because
definitely
I'm
out of character.
the furthest thing from aggressive these days. But yeah, I mean, I even got suspended back then for lashing out. Different times.
Yeah. And so, what was your educational journey like? I know that at one stage you dropped out. What was happening for you? Because, like, to hear that and to know you now, because like you've done really well academically, it's kind of a bit strange to hear that. What was going on there?
Yeah, so I kind of always did well academically, but it was the environment that didn't suit me. And in secondary school, it just gradually got worse after. By that stage, I was well behaved, because the physical punishment aspect of things in France scared me into submission, I'd have to say, although I was already much better behaved by that point. I would not advocate it as a good system, because I think that people are then left with trauma from that.
Hmm.
And I've heard adults who went to the same school who, you know, still would have had issues going back to that. But I think in secondary school, it was just going from a small rural school of about 40 pupils, maybe 50, to a school of about 1,000. It, it was quite overwhelming. And even though I got on well with the teachers and kind of liked the school in a way, the environment just did not suit me. And after a while, I just just how much it didn't suit me started to make me feel physically ill.
Mm.
And so I did some of my studies from home then for a while, and ultimately just gave up on high school altogether with no qualifications. And for a long time, that that was a really sore point for me. Like when I would hear people talking about their high school years, and what subjects they took and what qualifications they got and that sort of thing, it would always have made me very, very uncomfortable. And I would be loath to talk about it, because in the end, I found a different path. I went through the Open University and
Like me.
got a degree, and then got a master's in history from the Ulster University Coleraine. So by that point, I was like, I'd rather focus on that, because that's something that's good, that I've achieved, that I succeeded at. High school, I don't want to talk about that.
School to me is just it's an awful place. It really I hated school, to be honest. And I was the same. I at 24 started my degree and worked full time and got my degree, and but school is awful. It really is awful. If you don't get it and fit into a sort of clique, because it is a clique, right? There's little cliques, little gangs hanging around, and if you don't fit into one of those, it's just an awful place to be. I really think it's terrible. I think it's a really terrible way to do education. But no surprise, right? The state runs it.
Yeah, it's very, very rigid, very, very rigid. Just the whole setting, the whole curriculum. I mean, I would have done far, far better, I think, if I was allowed to go ahead on certain aspects of the curriculum to begin with.
Mm.
It would have solved a lot of my problems, made
So
it a
that,
lot more interesting for me.
yeah, that is interesting because having known you now the past couple of years, it's interesting to think about, your how you've built this model of the world, because you're one of the people that I would always go to for a perspective on something. So, having that sort of sense that you're tuned in to what is happening in the world, you'll always have a balanced take, you'll know the different perspectives. When did that start? What age did you start being aware about the news and what's happening in current affairs?
Well, no, I I took an interest in following the news from a very early age. Even before starting school, I would I would ask my dad, what's this about? What's going on there? Um, just because I wanted to know and learn more about the world. I
What are we
always,
talking? Are we talking before, before 10? Before?
oh yeah, yeah,
Wow.
like 3 or 4.
Wow. That's
It
incredible.
doesn't sound weird to me, but I can understand that. Um, Definitely not all kids are like that. But
Mm.
um, No, I would have asked older relatives about, you know, what was it like growing up in the olden days, which in hindsight sounds a bit offensive, but um,
It's true though.
yeah, yeah. But no, I was just always interested in the adult world and about what was going on in the world, what had come before me, and I suppose for a long time I just observed what was going on without really forming any opinions on it. I'd have followed elections as a child and been aware of it and but didn't have an opinion.
When did you
So
form your opinions? When did you start to become sort of one side or the other?
I was always very interested in just assessing the different arguments for and against certain ideas or just weighing things up. And you could say that in a way my brain is always doing that, that any sort of issue that I think about, I'll come up with an idea or sort of a like a gut feeling about something, and then I'll try to think about the reasoning around whatever the issue is, and come up with pros and cons, and try to really think it through before having a strong opinion on something. Because to me, the last thing I'd want to do is come out making a really bold statement about something that I know very little about. And I think I've kind of always been that way, where it's really important to weigh things up first.
Mm.
And so I suppose just gradually into, you know, high school years, I'd have formed more and more opinions of what ideas I like, what ideas I dislike, and started to be drawn to sort of the politics of anything that resembles classical liberalism, libertarianism, even anarchism. All that side of the political spectrum interested me, because what the advocates of those ideas said resonated with me. So, I remember listening to Ron Paul, uh, interviews with Ron Paul during his presidential campaign.
2008, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking a lot of what this guy says sounds great to me. It really speaks to me, and I didn't agree with him on everything, but found him really interesting. And then once I started university courses, and the some of the modules touched on the origins of classical liberalism and the Enlightenment, which I already knew a bit about before, but to delve into that deeper and read excerpts from authors like John Stuart Mill or Locke or Smith, that um, I basically decided at that point that, while I hadn't had a label to really define where I stood, that that liberalism is my ideology, sort of classical liberalism. But I would be a believer in reclaiming the term liberal and liberalism, for what it really means in the proper sense of the word. But um,
What is that?
believing in liberty,
Right.
so believing in personal freedom, economic freedom, civil liberties, the whole package.
And it's the Americans that go a little bit off the edge where they define it differently, right?
Yeah, where basically liberal just means that you have socially liberal values, but economically you can be, you know, verging on communist and still, you know, arguably call yourself a liberal, which I disagree with. I think that it comes as a package.
Right. So what was it in terms of the point where it clicked with you to say, right, I'm getting involved with this. I'm gonna start digging it even deeper and get involved with spreading these ideas.
So for a long time, I just had a, a very deep personal interest in sort of the ideology and the history behind it. For a number of years, I would have considered myself strongly liberal, but didn't really do anything about it other than talk to friends and family about my opinions on certain things. But then, and I talk about this in a blog that should be on the Students for Liberty website very soon. Probably by the time you're watching this, it should be there. So I'd
I'll
say to
link it.
check it out. Yeah. Um, Basically, my my friend who I talk with all the time about these ideas and about political ideas in general saw an advert for Students for Liberty Regional Conference in Belfast in 2017 and suggested that it could be something for us to go to. So I was like, yeah, we'll go to that. Um, you know, Sounds like a good day out. Didn't really know what to expect. But when I arrived, when I arrived and met the people, and you were one of those people, Rob, and heard what was being discussed and heard more about Students for Liberty as an organization, what it stands for, I really just felt that I wanted to get involved somehow. I wasn't sure how, but I was like, I could have found a home here. These people are so welcoming and talk about such interesting topics and are very, well versed in a lot of different areas. And I want to talk with them more. I want to learn from them. I want um, to help spread the message. Share the organization's ideals
Which is
because
no easy task in Northern Ireland, right?
certainly not because I mean I talk about this a bit in the blog, but essentially here, in a lot of countries you have outright hostility to the ideas of liberty. You have people who are communists or fascists or sort of bordering on those ideologies who despise everything that we stand for and will try to undermine what work you're trying to do. But here it's different because sort of classical liberalism, libertarianism is virtually unheard of,
Mm.
and people's idea of what politics is here, like when people talk about anything that's political or talking about politics here, um, it basically means DUP and Sinn Féin.
Yeah.
That sort of um, basically just on the constitutional question, rather than whether people believe in free markets or controlled economy or civil liberties or social conservatism or whatever. To people here, politics generally means our local politics, and sort of the toxic climate around that. So no, I'm not saying nobody cares, but very few people would care about the ideas of liberty and just the philosophy behind different political ideologies in general. So in a way, you've got a blank slate, which that can be interesting, but at the same time, you've you've got a real apathy for the sort of values that we represent because it's unheard of and people don't really see what relevance it has to the context here.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a problem with that sort of apathy um, throughout Ireland in general, but I think probably here it's worse because people think that nothing's ever going to change.
Yeah. And I know a couple of people that do live up there and find it frustrating to be able to reach people and to get people to listen to the ideas, you know. We just want you to be free. We don't want to we don't want to make you join any cult. We just want you to be free. We want you to take on ideas that enable a free society. And because the question of religion and unionism versus republicanism is so on people's minds, it's hard to pierce that apathy. That's what I found anyway.
Yeah, it's like the the whole question of Northern Ireland's future is people's kind of immediate concern here that you know people it's mad, like people talk about you know Irish freedom and stuff, but what do they really mean by freedom?
Yeah. Freedom to be ruled by their
Yeah,
tribe.
if if it means like it basically just means freedom from Britain. It doesn't
Mm.
mean freedom in the true sense of the word. It doesn't mean that you want to have more liberties. So I don't know. It can be frustrating, especially at the minute when there's a lot of things happening here, unfortunate things.
Mm.
Riots are back. Um,
What kicked that off? I wanted to get into that. So the pandemic has obviously been a car crash for everyone around the world, but it stoked tensions back up. And I seen a video last week where some young fella, and it's literally like young teenagers that are throwing Molotov cocktails into buses, and they're just burning Belfast, basically. What sparked that? Would you say?
right. So there's a lot of reasons behind it, as there always are with this place. But
Hmm.
officially, the reason, like the main reason given, is that last year during the height of the restrictions, there were prominent Sinn Féin political figures who attended a funeral that was very large and breached the regulations. And basically, the public prosecution service decided that they weren't going to prosecute anyone that was seen to be there, even though it was against the rules. And in that sense, what happened then is that a lot of loyalists, the people who want to remain part of the UK, were they felt that basically Sinn Féin, who are the nationalists who want a united Ireland, could get away with whatever they want, and there wouldn't be consequences for them, and that the political system here is kind of pandering to them. So they felt really aggrieved by this and took to the streets, and in a large since riled up young people, very young people, like as young as 12, I think, into believing that the sort of the future of their community and identity is at stake, and that to defend it they need to, you know, destroy things and make their voices heard that way. And it's tragic because uh, it's been 23 years since the Good Friday Agreement, and you have people now born long after that, like these 12-year-olds who are out throwing petrol bombs and spouting hatred and attacking people and whatnot over something that they probably don't know that much about.
Mm.
And I mean, there are other reasons, of course, as well. One, I suppose, the elephant in the room is Brexit and the implications that that has for here. Um, Loyalists are very, very angry about the fact that there are some custom checks between Britain and Northern Ireland. They feel that that undermines Northern Ireland's place in the UK.
Mm.
So there's a lot of anger about that as well, especially after that Boris Johnson had promised them that there would not be uh, these checks, and they feel that he's sort of thrown them under the bus and
Mm.
that no one's listening to their voices. So there's that as well, and there's just the fact that political unionism is kind of losing influence gradually because I think that their association with staunch social conservatism really isn't helping their case.
Mm.
But political unionism is nowhere near the force that it once was, and people whose entire identity is shaped around that are are worried about, you know, their future, like what this means for them. And it's just so sad to see that this is happening in 2021, and that there's a failure of leadership as well, like the inflammatory sort of rhetoric that the politicians use here routinely on both sides is just so disappointing.
Is this not an opportunity to get our ideas out there? Like, it sounds like what is really the problem is opportunities for young people. Like, I know the economy in Northern Ireland is not great, right? Out of all of the union, it's probably the least affluent. Would I be right in saying that?
I'm not sure about Wales, but it is definitely one of the places with the least opportunities, certainly.
Yeah, for young
And
people especially.
yeah, and like near where I live in the northwest, up around Derry, it's particularly pronounced, the lack of opportunities. That is a huge problem because if people feel like they have a life that's, you know, within their control, and that they're going somewhere, and that they've, you know, that they have their own life to worry about, rather than, you know, making everything about what flag flies on top of a building,
Mm.
or that sort of thing. I think it would be very different.
Mm.
But the whole economy here is kind of rotten because there's there's a lack of dynamism, and there's such a large public sector
Mm.
that is sort of superfluous and really
The
propped
drain.
up by the British government to try and keep people happy.
Mm. And then you've got
So
the question of, a united Ireland, and, eventually that question's going to be coming on the table, and people are going to have opinions about that. And if you're someone from the South, right, and I'm sure you have a perspective on this, is it an attractive proposition for people in the South to take on that massive public sector and load on even more problems? I'm not so sure, right? I'm not so sure that that is an attractive proposition.
I
You-
mean, things would have to change here. I think that, I mean, the way I see it, the long term future is definitely in a united Ireland. But for that to work, the hostilities here need to sort of quieten down. People need to have more opportunities. The if there's a united Ireland, we can't have the same sort of scale of a public sector up here. That has to change. Um, I think that it would open up opportunities, especially after Brexit, when, you know, I've been a Remainer all along. That has a lot more to do with me being originally from Fermanagh than it has to do with me loving the EU. But it has Brexit has not been good for Northern Ireland or for the border regions of the Republic. It has it's not going to be good at this rate. So if the current situation, the current arrangement for us is not attractive in the long term, it would make a united Ireland a lot more attractive, and a lot of people who, would be moderate unionists could be swayed if they saw an opportunity there.
Mm.
But I just wonder, for the people who are in those sort of comfortable public sector positions that are, arguably superfluous, how would they feel about, needing to look for other work, or, for their departments to be downsized or whatever? I think there would have to be some sort of devolved structure still in place. I think that there would still need to be sort of a Northern Ireland Assembly within a United Ireland, at least to begin with, for it to work, because it would be it would be a huge shock to the system for the whole way of operating here to change overnight.
This moves us nicely on to what's happening currently with the pandemic. And what you're really saying there is like there's a call for leadership, right? And I think on the whole island of Ireland, we're lacking that sense of a roadmap towards getting us out of this situation, right? We've been all sitting in our houses down here in the Republic since, well, mostly the restrictions have been at level 5 since Christmas Eve. I don't know what it's been like up in the north, but it's just ridiculous, and there's no end in sight. Like they did
Yeah,
give us the freedom to go 20 kilometers or within your county, but still, there's no roadmap to say when this is all going to end. And I know you have a few opinions on this.
yeah, it's been the same up here, except for instead of a 5 kilometer limit, which you had for a long time, we had like an advisory 10 miles, 16 kilometers, um, that you could be turned back or get into trouble for being outside that without a good reason. But essentially, to leave your home, you'd have to have a good reason, whatever they deem to be a legitimate reason to leave your home. And it had been like that for months until very recently, with no roadmap, um, just left completely in the dark. Businesses not knowing even
Yeah.
roughly when they'd be allowed to reopen. People, it was very, very depressing for a lot of people.
Mm.
And yeah, there's just been a complete lack of leadership, because even, you know, England, Scotland, and Wales all had roadmaps a good bit before we did here, because I think the riots here distracted from the urgent need to talk about reopening.
Yeah.
What it all boils down to, though, is people letting the politicians think that they're happy enough with delaying reopening, or that, they're happy enough with lockdown for as long as the government think they need it for. People people agreed to this far too easily.
It's the same down here. People
Yeah.
are apathetic, and they're not willing to put up a fight. There was a couple of people who opened their businesses, and the Gardaí came and closed them down and gave them fines. And I don't know if you have fines
Oh yeah.
for those
Yeah.
things. Yeah, but you can be fined up to, I don't know, it's €5,000 maybe down here. I don't know if anyone has been fined for €5,000. I think the first fine is like €200, and then they go up incrementally, I suppose, the more of an offender you are.
Do you know what I think is probably the most egregious part of this whole thing? Is the fact that for the past year and a bit, almost that entire time, you're a criminal if you have a friend round for a cup of tea at your house.
Hmm.
That is completely unacceptable.
And they've written it into law now here in the South. It's an unvaccinated person with a vaccinated person is a criminal offence now. It's insane.
But you're not allowed to have household mixing anyway at this point. Or are vaccinated people allowed?
A vaccinated person with a vaccinated person is okay, apparently, but an unvaccinated person with a vaccinated person.
Well, you're still a step ahead of here. No one's allowed to visit each other, but yet everybody does. It's interesting because
But to sign that into law, Russell, that's that's a scary proposition. That you'll have police coming in enforcing: are you vaccinated? Are you not vaccinated? It creates this two-tier mentality.
it is a disgusting sort of prospect that they would actually enforce something like that. And it's something I'm writing about at the minute. Something that I'm very interested in is, first of all, I would be as pro-vaccine as they come. I think that the vaccines are safe, and that I'd urge everyone to get vaccinated. I really don't buy the conspiracy theories about the vaccine. But at the same time, I don't want my ideological opponents in this case, people who do have reservations about the vaccine. I don't want them to be made to be second class citizens because of their sincerely held belief. I just think that's completely wrong and discriminatory. If if it's up to businesses whether they want to see a vaccine passport to allow people into their cafe or restaurants, those who choose to do so won't be getting my support, because I would I would not want to sit in a restaurant if an unvaccinated friend couldn't sit there with me.
Mm.
I think that it's completely absurd. Like, if you think back to a couple of years ago, if somebody said, if somebody suggested a proposal um, to force people to produce any form of ID, or never mind like a health status certificate, to sit in a cafe,
Mm.
sit in a restaurant.
It's bizarre where we've come to.
I mean,
That we're actually seriously discussing this. It's medical apartheid, right?
yeah, I really, really hope that it doesn't go that far, but I can't say that it won't at this rate, because I mean a lot of people are just so fed up with this that the Overton window has shifted so much towards authoritarianism that people would put up with just about anything, any
Mm.
encroachment, just to get back to some semblance of
Yeah.
normality.
People are totally demoralized.
And I think as well that there's a lot of people on my side of the argument, the pro-vaccine side, who unfortunately would have a lot of contempt for people who don't want to take the vaccine, and want to punish them for their opinion. I think that's really unfortunate.
What would you say to those people?
I would tell them to remember, first of all, that it is not even necessary to have 100% vaccine uptake for it to be a success. You don't need anywhere near 100% uptake. So if a minority of the population, and we are looking at a minority, have their concerns, which I believe are unfounded, but if they have their concerns and don't want to take it, they're not going to ruin everything by not taking it.
Mm.
It should be up to them. And I would just ask people to be a bit more understanding and have a bit more empathy.
Mm.
But really, um, really, what it comes down to is there there should not be a system that discriminates against a minority of the population because of a sincerely held conviction. It's up to us who believe the vaccines are safe and are a good tool to promote reopening. It's up to us to make the case that these vaccines, although I can't say that they're 100% safe for everyone, the risk involved is a far smaller risk than the risk involved in so many things that most of us do on a daily basis. That you need to get the risk into proportion, and we should be making that case rather than just writing people off and being angry at them that they don't agree with us. Much as it is frustrating to see all the conspiracy theories about microchips being implanted in them,
Yeah, a
or
lot of that is nonsense, but I would argue back that the risk of this coronavirus is actually overplayed big time, and the figures are being misrepresented. People who die with COVID and people die from COVID, far misrepresented in the media. Like the numbers who are dying from solely COVID are minuscule, absolutely minuscule. But the scare tactics of the media are making people really fear and raise the risk to levels that it actually isn't realistic. I don't think young people needs to get the vaccine, to be honest.
well, I mean, first of all, I completely agree with you that the figures are definitely distorted by this ridiculous concept of counting people as COVID deaths if they've tested positive within a certain amount of time, regardless of what they die from. Even if it's a factor, I think they should look at all the factors and assess what role COVID actually had in someone's death, rather than trying to, weaponize people's suffering uh, as a bat to beat people with, to scare people into believing that we need to abandon our entire way of life
Mm.
for the foreseeable future. I agree that, again, it's an issue of proportion, where just as people who are concerned about the vaccine are blowing things out of proportion, and are, you know, anytime someone dies a short time after getting the vaccine, no matter what they died of, oh, it must be the vaccine.
Yeah, it's happening on both sides. Yeah.
It's happening on both sides, exactly.
Hmm.
And I think that everyone just needs to commit themselves to some sort of intellectual honesty in this whole debate. And I think I think as well, it's important that we make sure there is a debate, because for
Yeah.
a long, long time there was no debate.
Well, there still really isn't down here. Like, I don't know what it's like in the media up in Northern Ireland, but RTA do not represent the side of anyone who is not zero COVID, and that is just disgraceful, in my
Oh,
opinion.
I know that you have that problem down south. It is not much better up here. It's it's probably better in England, to be honest, but it's it's this same sort of ridiculous notion of just eradicating the virus through lockdowns, which is never going to happen, not in a million years. Uh,
And
even
go on.
even countries where, that get praised for their zero COVID approach, like New Zealand and Australia, it'll flare up again eventually.
Yeah. And this is all evidence of this very, very dangerous precedent that is being set, where safety has become the religion of people, and safetyism is all of a sudden what everybody's all about. It's like everybody's become advocates of this nanny statism, where people are like pointing fingers at different demographics and different cohorts of people, saying you shouldn't do that, you're putting everybody at risk, we're all in this together. These are really nasty, manipulative statements that are going on. Like, you hear all this new normal, flatten the curve. All these things have a very deceptive undertone to them, and they all usher in this idea of safety first, safety first. I don't have a TV, but when I get down to my father's, at the top corner of the RTE, they have "Stay home, stay safe" or something like that.
Yeah,
That's just, there's something really creepy about this whole safetyism, and it's being drip fed into the populace to just think safety and snitch on anybody who might disrupt the safety. And, as liberty advocates, safety isn't actually the main priority. It's about freedom, it's about
yeah,
having choice and having your own autonomy, decide your level of risk and what it is that you're going to do. And I know you write a lot about this. So, yeah.
yeah. So I think different people have different opinions on this, but certainly my opinion, and I think the opinion of most people, is that life is about living, not just being alive. So, in order to live a fulfilling life, you have to assume certain risks. If you live a life where your main goal is to minimize risk, you're not going to live a very fulfilling life. I mean, unless that's what you want to do. But in
Yeah.
my opinion, and in most people's opinion, I don't want to live like that. So it is true that this whole past year and a bit has just been a terrible acceleration of this trend towards, safety is the number one thing in life, and pushing back against the nanny state and safetyism is one of the things that actually got me interested in sort of the ideas of liberty to begin with. Was was this idea that, these bureaucrats know better what people should be doing than they do themselves. People, it's it's my life, it's your life. No one should be able to dictate how we should live it because they think it's what's best for us. So
Yeah, it's a
it,
very
it
dangerous
has,
path.
yeah, it it's been happening for a long, long time, but it's this unwillingness to even have a concept of personal responsibility
Mm,
and assuming risks. It's
mm,
like, whether it's getting a vaccine and being aware that there's a minute chance of harm coming to you that way, or whether it's stepping outside your front door and assuming the risk that, uh, an asteroid could hit you,
hmm.
or a plane could land on you, or whatever. um life is all about certain risks, and assessing what risks are worth it in order to live a fulfilling life, and what risks are just too much.
Yeah, and what's come into my awareness, I saw a cute little video of two very elderly people who have been kept apart for a long while in a nursing home, and they were brought together, and it was really sweet to see. But if I was in the twilight of my life, and the government said you're not allowed to see anybody, and it was purported to be in my benefit, I would find that the most mollycoddling of authoritarian, totalitarian, it just makes me feel angry that
Yeah,
somebody is taking away what potentially could be my final years and saying that I'm not allowed to see the people that I love in my life. That nearly drives me to sort of take up arms.
yeah, it's extremely condescending,
Yeah.
unbelievably condescending. And I think that throughout this whole crisis, the solution should have been, rather than looking to what the Chinese Communist Party were doing, it should have been looking at focus protection for those who think that the risk of them leaving their home is too high a risk for them to take, that they can be supported by the people around them in isolating themselves for as long as they want to, as long as they see the need to. It should not have been, by force, that the government is telling all of us that the risk is too great. You have to put your life on hold for, well, they didn't say years. They said 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, depending on where you are.
Mm.
If they had have said years, I don't think people would have been so passive about it. But I I've opposed the lockdowns consistently all along, and there were times, particularly around a year ago, when that opinion would have been guaranteed to lose you a lot of friends,
Hmm.
because people just felt so strongly about it, that safetyism, that that is the caring way, and that if you believe that people should, have a say in their own lives, that's uncaring, and that's, that you want people to die, when that is absolutely a, a terrible mischaracterization
Totally. It's the
of
opposite.
our position.
Yeah. I think we've bled that one to death, Russell. To be honest, let's brighten things up. Recently, you have come across a very interesting piece of technology. Uh, you bought yourself a little red tractor.
Yeah, a vintage tractor, an International B414. It's about 60 years old, 1961. And I had always wanted to own a tractor, particularly a vintage tractor, my whole life. It was something that would have been on the bucket list if I had one. I suppose, like, I was born in Fermanagh. There were tractors everywhere. I'd have been exposed to that, and as with most little boys, they love tractors. But a lot of people then sort of grow out of that, and they have other interests, and most people don't just go and buy a tractor because they want to. But it's something I'd always wanted to do. I never grew out of that fascination for tractors. So because there was nothing else really happening this year so far, um, other than my work, I just thought, why not? This is the time to do it, and it's not as if it's a complete white elephant of a purchase. I have been developing a piece of woodland for the past 7 years, and the tractor will come in very handy for that. So there's purpose to it. But I guess I was in quite a dark place at the time, and I just felt like I needed something positive to happen to me this year,
Mm,
something noteworthy, and to feel in control as well, to feel
mm.
like there's that I can still do something.
So
Um,
important.
yeah, that I can make something happen in my life.
Mm.
And so I just thought, why not go for it? Going to look at tractors gives you an excuse to go about different parts of the country, and um, you get something that you've wanted for a long, long time. Um, it
I'm,
it just it
I'm not,
it was the right time.
yeah, I'm not a tractor enthusiast, but like, it looks like a nice one.
Yeah, I mean, it runs well, and haven't had any sort of significant bother with it.
Yeah.
Um, just a bit of maybe cosmetic finishing touches would be needed. Like there's a side panel I need to order, and there's part of the seat that maybe needs a bit of work done to it. The link box needed a bit of welding, but very, very solid tractor. Plenty of use so far. I'm delighted with it, and it couldn't have been better timing.
Yeah. So people might be interested to learn more about what it is that you do. You frequently do interviews with people on the SFL Instagram channel. Is there anyone lined up, or is there any interviews that you would urge people to go back and have a look at?
Um, well, I'm not sure when this is going to air, so I'll not talk about anything upcoming. But certainly looking back at some of the interviews I've done, if if you want to if you want to hear about the crossover between the ideas of liberty and pop culture, whether it be music or fictional universes or whatever, I would urge you to check out the Liberty and Pop Culture series. So I've spoken to people there like Matt Kibbe, like Stephen Kent, Chaba Toth, Trevor Burrus, Zach Harvey. I've interviewed so many fascinating people,
Mm,
and one of the more recent series I've done is on innovation, free market innovation, and I'll admit that technology isn't really my field. So I learned so much researching for these interviews and learned so much from my guests that uh, if there's something for everyone in those interviews. If you know a lot about the subject, you'll you'll be right at home. But if you don't, then it's a good opportunity to learn. I've been talking about private cities. I've been talking um, about AI, about so many different aspects of how free markets drive innovation and technology and ultimately improve people's lives.
Amazing.
I've also interviewed, had the great honor of interviewing Piotr Markula, who's an activist for Students for Liberty in Belarus. He's been arrested multiple times, spent
Yeah.
time in horrendous conditions in prison for his activism promoting liberty in a very unfree regime that is Belarus. And talking to him, hearing what he has to say should give anyone a bit of inspiration to do their bit to promote liberty.
Indeed.
He's gone the extra mile.
Yeah, big time. Very interesting character. I would recommend that. And what I will do is I'll put a link in the description below so people can check all those things out. Russell Coates, thank you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, and anyone watching, please check out the Students for Liberty blog. So much interesting content there. Um,
Absolutely. I will link that
thank you.
below as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob, for talking to me today.
It's
It's
been
been
a
a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will talk to you guys again very soon. Bye.